The other interesting rumor, and I guess two rumors here in the laptop space, one makes sense, one doesn't so much. 15-inch MacBook Air. So after just announcing an all-new MacBook Air, Apple is supposedly working on an all-new MacBook Air again. And this one is supposed to be 15 inches, which I think, just like sort of my explanation before, makes a lot of sense. It'd be nice to give people a bigger screen, better battery life, basically something that sits right in the middle between the Air and the Pro. And I think that maybe this is something Apple should have done a long time ago. Because if you remember, not too long ago, what was it, 2011-ish, 2012, 2013, they had the 11 and 13-inch MacBook Air, which I don't think a lot of people remember that tiny, itty-bitty 11-inch MacBook Air. But I think this makes perfect sense. Might not see it till next year is sort of the timeline. But what thoughts on this, Matt? 15-inch MacBook Air? I like the idea.
Yeah, no, I like the idea too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we heard these rumors before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is
a while ago.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago, but I think it was supposed to be for like this generation of design at least. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for this. I think, like you said, this is something that people would really want, and it's not quite as like hefty as a 16-inch MacBook Pro because it's significantly thinner, but you also get the bigger size, which I think a lot of people would like. So yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. What was I going to say? Yeah, would this be something that you would get, or would you? Or I guess let me put it this way: out of the people that you know, do you think they would get the 15 over the 13? I guess it's almost 14, but like 13.6.
I think so. I think that it depends on the price, and I think Apple has to strike a very careful balance between pricing between these things. But I think that, if I'm thinking about like the people in my life, my aunts, uncles, my parents, my grandparents. A lot of people like the bigger screen on all their devices. So I think that if it was maybe $200 more or $300 more, I see a compelling case that's made where many people would get that bigger screen, because obviously the MacBook Air is a big top seller because of its price. Obviously it's a big deal. It's a good computer, all that stuff. But I think that a lot of people would also be more tempted to get it if it had a bigger screen. I don't know what the number is of people who are like, I'm not going to get this because the screen's too small. Maybe that exists. But I think that like it makes sense on the iPad and also on the iPhone, I do think it makes sense on the MacBook Air. And just as people love the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I think a lot of people would like the 15-inch Air. For me, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because we both have the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I have taken this out of sort of the clamshell mode a lot, and I've been using it around the house. And there are definitely times where I wish that I had more screen real estate. I thought I wouldn't be bothered by the 14-inch, but it's a little small sometimes. If I was given the option today to do 15 or 13, I'd probably do 15. But if I was going to, get a new computer now and I was looking at the MacBook Air, I probably wouldn't wait for the 15. I don't know if, if they were launching at the same time, that might be a different story. But for now, I think if anybody's on the fence, just get it now because it's not going to be a big deal. But I do think it makes sense. What are your thoughts? Do you have any regrets not going 16-inch on the Pro, and would you get a 15-inch Air?
Absolutely not. I love the 14-inch. Like I never once have wanted more screen real estate. Well, okay, maybe I have, but not so much more that I'd rather have a bigger computer, if that makes sense. So like if there was some kind of magical way to have more screen real estate and not have a bigger computer, then I'd go for that. But it's not worth it for me to go to the chunky 16-inch MacBook Pro. That's a little much for me. I'm really happy with the size of this. But speaking of the iPad or the MacBook Air, I agree. I would just buy whatever exists because who knows, this thing might never actually come. So the 13-inch is still, it's like 13.6, right? So it's a little bit bigger than 13. So I think that's still going to be plenty for, your schoolwork, your documents, your web surfing, all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be perfectly fine. If the 15 and 13 existed at the same time, which one would I get? I'd probably get the 13. And I guess we could just lead into the next rumor, which is kind of my dream computer, which you're probably going to think is crazy. But apparently the rumor is, this is from, who is this from? Majin Buu on Twitter. But basically, apparently we are getting a 12-inch MacBook Pro. So not a 12-inch MacBook, not a 12-inch MacBook Air, but a 12-inch MacBook Pro that apparently will be equipped with an M2 Pro and M2 Max processor inside. Now, that rumor makes no sense. Like, I don't get it. I don't see how that could possibly be true. But if it is true, I'm down for this, and here's why. really, all I want is my iPad Pro to be a Mac, or do everything I do on the Mac, basically video editing. That's all I really need at this point. So if I was able to get a 12-inch MacBook that did all the things my current MacBook does, then I would get that. That'd be my mobile setup. And I would get a Mac Studio as my desk setup. And that way, when I am on the go, I have something small that, you know, honestly, most of the time when I'm on the go, I'm not really editing or anything. I'm just surfing the web or doing anything like that. So actually, the iPad is fine for that. It's just for those small occasions where I do need to do work on the go. And then this small computer would be able to handle it. Now, I say that, but also on the other hand, we kind of talked about multiple times how the 13-inch MacBook Air, now with the M2, is probably going to do most of the things that we need anyway. Like, is it going to be as good? No, but it's going to be able to handle it. So, since I don't think this is going to happen, I'm going to say 13-inch MacBook Pros or MacBook Air is probably the way to go. But if this 12-inch comes, I don't know. I'm going to be interested, even though the more I look into it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. What do you think?
This makes zero sense to me. And my biggest thing with this is, if they're going to make a MacBook Pro of this size, why would you do that and just not... The iPad Pro already has the guts of a MacBook Pro. It'd have the exact same internals for the most part. For argument's sake, why not just unlock the potential of the iPad Pro to do that and not bother making this all new laptop? That's why I don't know where a MacBook Pro of this size makes sense. But even if it wasn't a Pro, I don't see where a 12-inch laptop fits into Apple's category right now anywhere. Yeah. And this is from, we first heard this from Mark Gurman, who said Apple's working on a 12-inch laptop. He didn't say Air, he didn't say MacBook, he didn't say Pro, he just said 12-inch laptop. Then that source came out and said it was going to be maybe a Pro. You also have, was it Ross Young who says he has no, or was it Ross Young or Ming Chi Kuo? Somebody said, I think it was Ming Chi Kuo that says they've heard nothing about this. So there's a lot of conflicting rumors, as tends to be the case. But I just, despite whatever they make this Pro, Air, whatever it is, where does this fit in the lineup? And it's almost the exact same issue that happened before with the other 12-inch MacBook, which is, why is this expensive and how is this different or better than the Air? When you have it, you know, the lineup as it is with the Pro, because the Pros are there, they're bigger, they serve their purpose, they're their thing. But if you have this 12-inch MacBook, then the Airs, what does the MacBook give you that the other things don't? I don't understand where it fits in and what it's going to be priced at, and it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, that's the confusing thing. So I'm bringing up the MacBook line right now on Apple's website. So we have, let's just assume these rumors are true. So right now, that would mean that this is what the lineup of laptops would look like. So we have the MacBook Air with the M1, which is still selling for $999. Then you'd step up to the new MacBook Air with the M2 chip, which would be $1199. That's the starting. Then I would assume if they do this 15-inch MacBook Air, I mean, would they price it the same as the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is $1299, or would it be above that?
I would say either $1299, $1399. I could see a $200 like premium for.
So either way, we would have a 15-inch MacBook Air or a 13-inch MacBook Pro for the $1299, $1399 price points. Again, I wrap my head around that. But then you have the MacBook Pro 14, which starts at $1999. So this 12-inch would slot in what, like $1699, $1799? I'm assuming.
Assuming it's a Pro,
if it's a Pro.
I mean,
if it's a Pro.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere there, right?
So I guess that actually, I mean, that means every price point you have an option, which I guess works.
But a 12-inch screen is not a wide variety of people who want that.
Right. That's the kind of that's the question, because I mean, how much smaller will it be than a 13-inch display? I mean, not that much. And also, well, I guess I'm thinking through this as I talk, but they did make a 12-inch MacBook before, right? And I think it was relatively popular, right?
Well, I guess we should talk about the downfalls of that. So for those who don't know, there was a 12-inch MacBook that existed called the MacBook. It had one port. It was USB-C. It had the butterfly keyboard. I think that was wasn't that the first Mac to get the butterfly keyboard?
That's the first one with USB-C.
This was 2015, right?
2017.
I think. The MacBook?
Wait, actually, that might be a...
because the redesigned Pros...
Model.
Yeah, the redesigned Pros came out in 16. I think it's around 15, 16, let's call it, ballpark. And the biggest issue people had with it was that it was really underpowered because it had the Intel mobile generation of processors that were they were as efficient and powerful as they could be at the time, which is to say they weren't very good at all. Obviously, there's a case to be made that Apple with their own silicon could transform this thing and do something ultra low power, make it great. But what benefit does that give you? Just, how much better could that be than the Air than if there was a Pro? What Pro wants a 12-inch MacBook Pro with that little screen, and you're not going to have good battery life? It just doesn't make any sense. The more I think about it, the more I just am baffled by this. Hey, you! Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Apple Circle podcast. If you want to check out the full episode, hit one of those videos right here, and also hit the other surprise video to see a surprise clip from the Apple Circle podcast. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and subscribe to the Apple Circle audio feeds and on all your favorite podcast platforms linked down below. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the main Apple Circle YouTube channel linked right down below.